Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of our Heart2Heart podcast with Kyle. Welcome back.
Hi, Anne. Thanks for having me back.
I'm really happy to see you again. Today is kind of an exciting conversation. You are at a kind of milestone moment in your life post-transplant. You've now been almost 5 years, so really excited to hear from you. And how have things been since we last connected?
Yeah, thank God I've been living really well since my transplant and when we last connected on episode 3. My son's now 6 years old, and it's just been amazing having the gift of time with him to build memories and just being his dad. And appreciative of the time and opportunity to be that partner that I talked so much about wanting to be on previous episodes. Yeah, and just that old man wisdom, which I also think I had mentioned before, that perspective of just how lucky I am to have the time that I have now and how fleeting time truly can be. And just, that understanding of the importance of family and health and the, retrospect of, even on the hard days, that these are the days that I've dreamed of having.
Do you think about that a lot? Like when you're just hanging out with him and doing your thing?
For sure. I think, especially when it comes to things just like bedtime, I'm sure a lot of people are rushing to get out of there and have dinner, finish work, watch whatever the latest TV craze is. And sometimes I obviously have those natural inclinations as well, but I make myself sort of pause and think about how hard I fought to be able to just sit there and lie with him in his bed and read another book or cut a little bit longer, do, bedtime. So I definitely am conscious of those decisions and the opportunity that I have to do it.
And it sounds like one of the things about life now is you're very present
Definitely
in those moments.
Yeah, hyper aware of those moments and very deliberate, I guess, at those times too.
Yeah, it's really a gift, really.
100%.
When you're not at home, one of the things I remember we talked about was sort of getting back to work. How has that kind of progression back to full-time work gone for you in the last little while?
Yeah, so it took a long time to get a new job. I think at the beginning, even what I was looking for, it was really important to me to find something that was at the very least hybrid. Just I was nervous about getting back out there and getting back to work and what that would mean. But for the last 2 years now, I've been working in marketing at a well-known Canadian company, and it's been good. I am very much in a hybrid, almost remote environment, which suits my lifestyle very well. And in terms of my health and whatnot, I made a decision to not disclose anything related to my medical status with them. Again,
that is your decision ultimately.
For sure. And, very on brand for me per se in terms of not wanting to be defined by my health and my experience. And then even in the workplace, not want to be treated any differently than anyone else. I'm very much not a comment about where it is that I'm working, just who I am and how I feel in general. I just almost have the goal of always just being on the same playing field as everyone else and not treated differently.
And very much, how do you, though, manage those moments where, given reality, you have to kind of juggle your health as well as your job?
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, the ongoing doctor's appointments and even days you don't feel well are a challenge. I think being hybrid and or somewhat remote definitely helps and gives me the opportunity to shelter myself from needing to disclose anything and take the time. And it's these days a bit more I need to be off camera right now, and that's a bit more understanding. But also in the world we're all living in now, where we're working around the clock, I sometimes use that to my advantage, right? If I can take the opportunity to get something done when I'm feeling well, in anticipation that I might not feel well, it's something that I always do. I sort of adopted the mindset of why do later what you can do now, because you can do it now and you don't know what later will bring. More often than not, I'm fine and I've done too much too quickly. But
stop overachieving.
But I think that's the approach I generally take from a mindset perspective, is just work hard and work when you can and get everything done and have the same, goals as most people, under promise and over deliver and all those things, but just doing it when I feel like I can, because for sure there's always days that I can't.
Yeah.
And especially with even just like side effects of medications, and in the crazy world of weather that we're all living through, even just like migraines that come in and out and all those pieces, you never know. So it's just about, making sure that you're always prepared for that.
But it sounds like you're working in your field, you're using your expertise in your training, and it sounds like you're in a pretty good work environment that allows you to kind of juggle when you need to, but succeed most of the time.
Yeah, 100%. It's
That's
very
really
positive.
great.
I also,
Congrats, like that's a huge milestone though.
for sure. I
Yeah.
also know that they would be very receptive if I did say anything. So
Yeah.
I think having that comfort blanket of knowing at any point in time, I can say, hey, this is a bit more of what's a part of me and who I am. And I think that they would be receptive to that and be accommodating. Also, gives me the flexibility to not say anything. Whereas if I felt like I was working somewhere, that would be like, why didn't you disclose this before? This is a problem, or this is, this, that, and the other. I might have felt like it was more necessary to say something else.
So you also are conscious of the culture of where you work to make sure, for all the reasons anybody would, but also extra vigilant because you want to make sure that, if you ever needed to, they'd be supportive.
Yeah, I think when going back to work after something like this, you sort of have to make your list of what's important to you. And, if the list could be 5 things or 6 things or whatever, and then you have to be realistic and say, okay, I'm only going to get 3 or 4 of those things, and then make sure that they're the things that are going to serve you best. So I didn't want to be in an office 5 days a week where I had to be there from 9 to 5, and then leaving the house at 7:30 or 8 and getting home at 6 or 7, not only because I wanted to have that time with my son, but also I knew that wouldn't necessarily work.
Would tire you out too.
Tire me out, and then doctor's appointments and days that you're not feeling well. So something like that in terms of the in office time, but just the flexibility became more important than it might have in a different scenario where you might have picked something that was in a certain area of the city because that was trendy or cool, or working in a certain dynamic or anything like that. All of a sudden that flexibility shot up its way too close to the top of the list.
Yeah, so a different prioritization that you went through, and it sounds like you got a good fit, which is really terrific.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that strikes me is when we spoke earlier, you were much earlier kind of in your journey post-transplant, and now we're coming up to your
5 years. Yeah,
5 years.
September will be 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So how do you mark that moment?
We definitely mark it on a yearly basis. My wife is insistent that we do so, and I guess people call it different things. Some people call it a transplant anniversary or a heart birthday, whatever works. Yeah, always making sure at the very least to celebrate with like family and close friends, and to mark it as if it is a birthday or something like that. And at times can become even more meaningful than an actual birthday. But I think just using that as an opportunity to like slow down and appreciate like where you were at and where you've come to over that time, as almost like a reset of time, is something that's really important to do. And then sharing that not only with yourself but with your loved ones is really great opportunity to even be able to have.
And how has your life changed in this period? You've talked about it a little bit in terms of how you set priorities for work and how you set priorities with your family. How has it changed your perspective overall?
Yeah, I think in general, I've tried to adjust my thought process in terms of like bucketing items and thinking about things about like what's within my control and what's not within my control. I think so much of going through heart failure and then the surgery and when they're going to call you and not is without your control, right? And then you just have to adapt to that. So once you are post-transplant and at a position where you feel like you can get back to everyday life, it's a helpful way to continue almost to bucket things that way, to compartmentalize. So there's things that still remain outside of control. Like sometimes you have those really bad days. And for sure that's something that is bothersome and it's a reminder of everything, but you're still going to get sick, you're immunocompromised. How sick you get when you do get it, also really frustrating. You can be in a household of someone who gets sick for half a day or a day and you're out for a week, right? It's the way that it hits you. That's without your control, right? And understanding that and moving away from the frustration of it over time is really helpful. And then, I mentioned we were talking about work, just it feels like there's always an appointment, sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, sometimes close to the house, sometimes far away, and how to build that into your everyday life, whether it's your family life or your work
Right.
life or anything like that. You know, there's always just this added load that you're carrying with you, something else to schedule in and organize, and that's going to always be there. You know, then there's just the baggage you carry every day, like what you went through, what it was like going through the heart failure, you know, wondering how long the heart's going to last, when you might get to a point where you have to relive the exact experience you've gone through. I still haven't decided if I think that it'll be better knowing what I went through or worse
Is that right, eh?
knowing what I went through. And
If I knew what I knew, would I do it again?
yeah,
Thing?
that type of thing. I don't know if it makes it easier or not. Yeah, something I think about is also just the time again I have with my son and like how much more time I have with him or not.
Yeah.
And then even just the genetics of it all. Like I don't have an identified gene for anything, so there's nothing to test for, and just not knowing.
But you did have congenital heart disease.
Yes.
Yeah.
So unsure if I've passed anything down directly to him or not. So I sort of bucket almost all of those things, a really big bucket of the things that I can't control, but I think compartmentalizing them and being able to access that bucket when I allow myself to, but then spending more time on the things that are like within my control is really important. And I think the biggest thing that's within your control is how you react to things and your outlook on life. And so much of that is being able to bucket those things into a specific bucket and
choose
say,
joy.
not now.
Choose joy and
Yeah.
things you can,
For sure.
Yeah. Those are some important skills. Like you got to train yourself up almost in a way to kind of get to that place, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite jokes to make in terms of what I can and can't control, at least in my household, is, you know, for so many years when I was in heart failure, there was no alcohol and there was no
Right.
salt and all that, and I like to reach for something I shouldn't necessarily be having and say, well, you know, it's not within my control. I need to have it. I couldn't have it for so long, but I think, you know, more
You're permitting yourself.
exactly, giving myself permission for sure, but I think even more so, like I went through that ebb and flow of being so restricted to feeling like, well, I just want to do what everyone else is doing. And then perception-wise, we obviously think that no one's exercising and everyone's just eating whatever they want all the time and doing whatever they want. And you are indulging to a certain degree, right? And then you sort of realize, well, maybe I went a bit too far in that direction too.
Still got to make good choices.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like in the last year or so, I've definitely tried to take control of that also in terms of just overall health and outlook and eating and whatnot too.
And what types of things in that kind of spirit have you been doing to kind of take back your control and live well?
Yeah, so I think just in general, in terms of how I think about it, is I think like what is in my control is what I'm doing to contribute to my health and longevity. So I might not have that ultimate control of what that looks like in the end, but knowing that there's things I can do to put myself in a better position is within my control. So, as we all know, sleep is something that's important and impacts a lot. So just making sure that I'm getting enough of it, which is probably the biggest challenge of all the things that one can do, especially, with a job and a young family and all the normal things that life has to offer. But sleep is something I think about a lot.
Absolutely.
Diet, eating the right things at the right time. And, everyone has different, digestive systems and body, the way that your body reacts to certain foods and whatnot, but learning your body and sometimes learning your new body after surgery and how it reacts to
is there a food that you didn't like
foods
before that now you like as a recipient?
I think I'm just more open to maybe cooked forms of vegetables. I think I had this really weird perception of cooked carrots before going through the surgery.
The new frontier, cooked carrots post-transplant.
Yeah. Now, you see something like that on like a menu at a restaurant or someone puts it on the table at their house, and you can at least consider putting it on your plate, right? It's not something that you have to proudly declare yourself as completely avoiding. But on top of that, exercise, I think it's something that's hard to start, but once you're doing it, it's hard to stop. And I think getting over that bridge, and then also like learning again what it's like to do that when it's not, I'm training for something specific, where I'm just trying to make like a lifestyle choice and change too. So I think even for me, like in the last year or so, more so since like last summer, so I guess we're approaching the year, I made a decision to, really change my diet, be a bit more restrictive in terms of, sugar and salt and all those things, and being more protein focused, but also really trying to build in that like consistent physical activity. So right now I'm, at a point where I'm trying to go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. It was a huge challenge at the beginning, right? You're
Yep.
almost looking at that calendar and you're saying there's work, there's family, there's all these random appointments. Where am I going to find time to do everything else? But I think when you realize that it's not only for you, but you're doing it to be like the better version of you, for work, for your family, for yourself, and all those things, it's almost easier to find the time and almost easier to, look at a partner or, whatever your support system is and say, hey, I might need help in this area, but it's really important for me to do these
That's
things also.
terrific.
So yeah, it's been
And
something.
did you set yourself any like fitness goals, or was there an event that you were training for, or?
No specific event. I guess the event of life. I just wasn't feeling good about where I was. I think I
Okay.
went, where I looking at even like the way I looked and felt post surgery when I felt so strong,
Yep.
and then when I allowed myself to do the things we all do in life, which is sitting all the time for a job and
Right.
indulging in food
You
and
want
all
to
those things,
strengthen
and I
up
wanted
again.
to just feel stronger and feel like I could look at something and not feel like I'm not sure if I can do that, right? And getting to the point where you sort of feel like you can do anything, obviously within some limitation, is a great point to be at. So I think just focusing on that and thinking about how good it feels to feel good,
Mm-hmm.
and having the
Mm-hmm.
mindset of like, I want to feel good tomorrow morning. I might not because of my medication or things outside of my control, but I also know if I drink this or eat this and my body reacts to that in a certain way, maybe because of my medications, I'm not going to have a great next day. So thinking
Got it.
through like what that future is and using
Consequences.
that as almost the impetus to get up and go and do that exercise is sort of what got me there.
And I think I understand that you're a recipient of some medals in your pursuit of fitness and well-being.
Yeah. I wish that I'd started the fitness routine prior to taking part in this, but last summer we went out, my family and I went out to the Canadian Transplant Games at that time were taking place in Ottawa. I wasn't sure that I even wanted to go in the first place. Again, very much not me to want to feel like a transplant patient for an entire week and being like, oh, I'm only surrounded by transplant people in general, but I'm definitely glad I went. I at the end of the day met people who were just like me, meaning this was a part of their life, but they had full lives elsewhere. We definitely made new friends who we're still in touch with. I took part in a few different events. Bowling, I think 5-pin bowling it was, and a 5K run as well as tennis. So I'm definitely the medal holder in there. But if I am being honest, I do have to say that I was the only person competing in my age range. So by that, de facto, just being there and competing, I did get a medal
Take
for
the
that.
honor. Take the honor.
But I was very proud to stand there with getting my medal put over my neck and holding the Ontario flag.
That's
and
awesome.
representing our sort of transplant community here. Was a special thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and that notion of community. You talk a lot about, you just want to be considered like everybody else and you want to live your life normally as you should. But also it sounds like, in addition to your family and friends, you've been thinking about like what it is that wants to tie you to community or communities. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's been part of your journey?
For sure. I think like while I make a point of going to things, I don't know that I don't maybe consciously realize it's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, okay.
I for the last 4 years I've gone to the Heartlinks like pin ceremony. I got my 1-year pin at that time, and I'll get my 5-year pin coming up at the end of the year when they do that. But just going and being there to see everyone from that community and support the people who are celebrating a big milestone has been something that I look forward to on a yearly basis. And I guess I find myself hearing about other opportunities to get involved and see myself like jumping at that. So, even though potentially slightly reluctantly went to those Canadian Transplant Games, and then even while there found out about this organization called the Orgamites, which is an educational program that teaches kids about the importance of their organs and how they're superheroes in keeping their bodies alive, and also introduces that subject of transplant at an age-appropriate level for kids. Was a really cool thing, and I've since volunteered with them as well. So I think just feeling that I am a part of something in a community, and also looking for ways to give back and be there to support others has been a great opportunity as well. So for sure.
It helps. It's
Yeah,
important. Yeah. It's a powerful thing, right? I mean, it's powerful for us, but it's also powerful for others because
for
you have a
sure.
lot to, it's very reciprocal in that
Yeah, and I
kind of
think
sense.
there's
Yeah.
so many, or not maybe so many, but there's enough things out there that everyone will find something that speaks to them.
Right.
It's like, for me, of no surprise that I was like pulled towards the orgamites, being that I have a young kid, and
Yeah.
we actually used the impetus of the transplant games to talk to my son about me being someone who has a transplant.
Yeah.
We hadn't really talked about it before. I
He was
hoped that
little.
his
Yeah.
memories wouldn't be of that, but we got a few books before we went, and the few days before we were going, we'd read the books, and it would talk about this. It was all based on like animals, but do we know anyone who, like that animal, has a big scar down their chest? Do we know anyone else who, like that animal, takes medications every day? And sort of helping tell that story, because I think that's what's out there the most. But then learning that there's this full curriculum to talk to kids about it, and where hearts are and the other organs are superheroes that are powering our lives and our bodies, and knowing that they're proactively going out there, just teaching kids about it in general, with the goal of there being a strong understanding of organs, but also the importance of signing up to be an organ donor is super important too. So I think it's by no surprise that that's one of the things that I was attracted to, but I think there's definitely something out there for everyone, and there's there's more opportunity within that said community to find your spot.
Yeah. And that's a good piece of advice. I guess one of the questions I have, and as I think about the fullness of your life these last few years, has there been sort of an unexpected challenge post transplant that no matter what preparation, and I know how much you prepared, is like kind of surprised you, and that you've kind of had to strategize around?
It's a tough question to answer. I guess it would be easy if there was just like one thing that was a huge struggle over time. I think it's just not, there's so much to do to prepare for the transplant.
Yeah.
And there's so much right after, right? You have the routine things, you have this doctor's appointment, it's this many times out, you do these tests, and they're all part of it and structured. But I guess what you're not prepared for is just getting back to everyday life and what that can bring. So I think even getting to a point where you work through things with yourself or with your family, and obviously the hospital has great support that they can offer as well post-transplant, but just figuring out how to manage the changes in you, right? In your body, in your mindset, in your heart, right? Like all those changes are definitely a challenge, and even getting to the point where you can find the right words to describe how you're feeling. This is within my control. This is not within my control. And, just everyone will have a different challenge along the way, but I think the longest ongoing challenge and is going to continue to be that mindset, right? Of you're living, you might go through an entire week where you don't even think about it one time because everything's too busy, right? And then someone gets sick and you're like, oh wait, I'm immunocompromised. Is everything okay? Is this going to happen? Am I going to get this? Am I going to get that? Right? There's always that reminder where you become hyper aware of who you are that you can't control. I mean, at the end of the day, it's sort of all a challenge. Life's a challenge for everyone, but it's one of those things where you're just always carrying that slightly heavier suitcase, a little bit of baggage that's a bit more than everyone else.
Would you tell yourself, coming out of your transplant, if you were able to whisper to yourself, going home, would you tell yourself anything different kind of as you left the hospital and started your life?
That's a tough one. It's hard to say. I mean, you don't know what the road ahead
but knowing now
has, but I guess you want to sort of share that it's going to be okay. And even for me, as much as I try and not be a part of things and not take advantage of all the things, like sometimes that's actually the right thing to do, and they're there for a reason, right? Nothing is there or remains there by accident, right? So I think when you're looking for someone to talk to, there's someone to talk to. When you want to feel like you're normal because you're a transplant patient and that's normal for your family too, there's other families that are going through it, right? And you can find them through the communities that exist and all the different programs that are out there. But I think, more so just you've already overcome the hardest part, right? Like you went through the illness. For me, it was like the going from defibrillators right into the LVAD and then into the heart transplant. And it was almost, I wasn't
during
sure.
COVID.
during COVID for sure. Yeah,
Yes.
like all of those
Yeah.
things. But it was like when I was getting just the defibrillator surgeries, I was like, these are so hard. This isn't fair. Why does no one else have to do this? And then you get an LVAD and you're like, wow, this is way harder. And then you have the transplant and you're like, I feel better now. Right. And it's almost just thinking of it as like that reset where sure there'll be the struggles down the road, but you've already accomplished so much and you're already strong. You've proven to yourself that you're stronger than you thought that you were. If I had the wisdom of myself now back then, I think that's what I would say. I don't know if I would have believed myself necessarily, right? Because every challenge feels like a huge challenge, right?
Yeah.
So I think part of it is it's all a process and you have to go through it, right? No one can really, once you've gone through the surgery and that's something someone else can do for you, there's a support system everywhere, but you really have to have the will and the drive to do it yourself and to get to a certain point.
I think that's actually an amazing spot to close our conversation on. But I always want to give you the last chance to see if there's anything else that you want to offer in reflection. I mean, I think thinking about the reality that everybody has to walk their journey themselves. But your affirmation that people are stronger and have been through the hardest part is very powerful. But you seem to be full of wisdom today, so I'll give you one more go. Anything else that you would want to offer as last words of advice or reflection?
I guess just to believe in yourself and to trust in the process. And it's important to think about the positive side, right? I think going through the whole process and the fact that you've had the transplant and you were able to rely on someone or their family to make a choice for them to be an organ donor is something that you have to be appreciative of. And I think as making the choice to do something within your control, like feel gratitude, is super important also, right? And I think about that all the time. And while I don't necessarily express it all the time, because at a certain point you sort of move on with your life,
Yeah.
but just the gratitude that I feel for my wife for literally everything that she went through alongside me, and the gratitude for my son who doesn't even realize to the fullest extent what we've all been through together, but just the time I have with him, and then to my parents and the rest of my family and my friends just for their support and being there to get me through it along the way, whether it was to get to that doctor's appointment or to be the cheerleader or the shoulder to cry on or whatever it is. And then like the doctors and medical professionals, like just thinking about all those pieces and how they had to perfectly fall to get you to that day. It can just change your outlook on things and remind you that there's so much to be thankful and appreciative for. So, for all those people, if anyone's listening, then you now get to hear it. And I think we should all just generally make like more of a conscious effort to share with people like, why and how often we appreciate them being there for us whenever we have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and how much they've given you strength, and you've drawn your own strength as you've gone forward in this journey. Amazing. Thank you so much, Kyle. It's very exciting to see you at this point. I look forward to you adorned with many medals at a no
Sounds
doubt
good.
future time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.